My name is Jeff Lloyd. I am the AVP of Cloud Strategy and Architecture at GM Financial. In my previous role, I served as the lead and manager of our big data rollout. And so in front of us here, you see a group of panelists that each has an expertise in a certain domain of what we call the full stack. So myself being data, we have infrastructure, security, and applications. So we give a good overview of a complete DevSecOps approach. And what we're going to be talking about today is specifically related around hyperautomation and machine learning and artificial intelligence towards an intelligent, composable business. Those are a lot of very big words to say everything that can and should be automated is going to be automated. I have spent my entire life automating myself out of a job, and all I get is more things to automate. Why is that, right? It's because of the fact that processes change, technology changes, it's moving at a clip I can't even fathom how much the changes that are coming. They're ultimately, and the changes that have come, right? And the pandemic has sped up things. Some reports are saying 5 years ahead of where we would have been. So hyperautomation, it is irreversible, it's inevitable, and we are going to be experiencing it more and more and more, and leaders and organizations through 2021, they're going to have to focus on these particular elements to be able to be the leaders in their specific industries. I think about the real currency of business today is speed, agility, the ability to adapt and transform to an ever-changing environment. With that comes the changes in employee experience. We all have experienced a very different work life the past 14 months. So many things that we have to adapt to. Our organizations are going to have to focus on making those elements a priority in order to continue to be competitive. So I wanted to just bring up those particular points. We're going to be talking from each particular domain area about the parts in the full stack. Before I move on to my other colleagues, what I want to talk about for me is who my end customer is and a recent success story. And then I'll turn it over to Aaron and then Chandra and then Nick to do the same. Then I want to structure the questions. I think maybe we'll start with a current state question, and then we'll go down the line, and then we'll talk about future state. So we'll look at where we are and where we're going. So my end customers, people who buy General Motors-based vehicles. And we're expanding into a lot of different areas. And General Motors is a global organization, so it's not just Chevys that you think about, right? But for a recent success that I was able to be a part of with many great individuals was the rollout of our customer experience chatbot. And so our chatbot itself, we started developing in 2019. We had no idea what was coming in 2020. And we actually shipped it January 10th, 2020. Had we not moved at the clip that we did to get that out the door, our customer experience representatives would have been so inundated in the volume of conversations that came out. The containment level of this particular bot and the ability for the team, who we just spun up as an agile team, to deliver iterative features faster, resulted in 1.6 million resulted conversations handled by the bot that our people didn't have to do. That was such a huge success story for our organization, and I'm so excited to have been a part of that. But ultimately, that said, we need to do more cognitive services. We need to do more automation strategies like that. So that's a success I had. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. Aaron, if you could introduce yourself, where you're from, what you are in the stack, who your customer is, and a recent success story. That would be amazing.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Lau. I'm from Ericsson. I'm the VP and head of end-to-end 5G systems from Ericsson. Now, for those of you who are aware, Ericsson is a major equipment vendor for wireless communication equipment, starting from 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, all the way to 5G now. And I'm very, very happy to be here today to have this opportunity to speak with, together with my fellow panelists. And the audience, I really admire you for sticking until the very end of the agenda today to listen to this panel. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I smile when I look at Jeff wanting us to talk about full stack because I'm at the very bottom of the stacks. So if you look at this, the telecommunication model, the very bottom of the stack is physical layer. Layer 1, physical layer, layer 2, layer 3, that's where I am. So we're basically talking about connectivity. That is really my product, my entire career has been about connectivity, and more specifically, wireless connectivity. So I personally started my career with second generation of mobile communication, and so all the way to 5G now, and I'm very, very passionate about 5G because I do want to mention that 5G is not any previous generation of technology. It is different. It's no longer just a consumer mobile communication network. It's much more than that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I will address, first of all, my major customers traditionally are operators, so Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, as well as regional customers, etc. But now we are expanding to more, especially with 5G, our customer base is going to expand to not just operators. And that's why it's important for all of you to take 5G from a different light, because every enterprise, when you start thinking about your infrastructure, that's where you will need to start considering about your strategy for infrastructure, how 5G plays a role in there. Enterprise becomes my customers as well. So this is the expansion into a new customer base because of the new technology. In terms of a recent success story and getting close to what the topic of today's panel, which is about hyperautomation, AI, and machine learning, I do want to mention, because we are all here in Texas, I do want to mention that Ericsson recently, it was last year in September, announced that we now have a digitized factory in Louisville, Texas. Now, when we're talking, we're in an era that most of the manufacturing mostly happened outside of the United States. We're bringing it back to the United States, digitize it. So it is, and it's going to, basically it has a lot of robots and AGVs to make, manufacture the equipment in an automated way with artificial intelligence. So we're basically using 5G technology to help our own manufacturing. And there is a real life example right here in Louisville, Texas. And moreover, this has been recognized by World Economic Forum as a Lighthouse Award. So that was a recent success story that also speaks to how 5G can be used in any kind of industry, and it's going to definitely impact every industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That's fantastic. Just because you're at the bottom of the stack doesn't mean it's not that less important, right? Foundations are important.
Yes.
I mean, we don't build skyscrapers on just dirt, right?
Right.
So
it's the foundation. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to turn it over now to Chandra, who's another layer in the stack. Chandra, if you could introduce yourself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Good to see all of you back again. I am super excited. It's been 1.5 years and 30 pounds. So I'm working on it. So as Jeff, you mentioned, bottom layer is what helping my applications run smoothly. So thank you to Erin and teams like that. So quick intro, I lead global application services for Unisys. Unisys is a Fortune 791 company with $2 billion revenue. My responsibility is $680 million business application modernization. Top 9 airlines in the world run our applications. For example, Delta runs our cargo operations software. Top financial organizations use our financial services offerings for offering their savings and mortgage solutions. Plenty of opportunity in terms of how do you really modernize a 40 or a 50-year-old legacy application, which we are going to touch in a bit. Coming back to a recent success story, we all know last year how crazy it was. When the first wave of vaccine rolled out, Unisys actually partnered with Delta Airlines, and Unisys and Delta Airlines played a key role in rolling out the vaccine that is much needed. We will talk about how we have automated that process. That is number one success story. Number two success story, we also help 4th largest bank in Brazil. A lot of impacts to the common public, right, with all these mortgage things happening in the world. We had to literally pause all mortgage processings very quickly because people can't or couldn't afford. With the automation we have established in place, we were able to pause very quickly 7 million mortgage payments. If it was a legacy process, you can guess how much time it would have taken, how many families it would have impacted. So that's the level of automation we are looking at, really solving that business problem. So those are the 2 success stories I would like to share. And good to see all of you.
Thank you, Chandra. I really appreciate that. It's great to have the application view in this panel. And with that, though, we've got to be thinking about cybersecurity with the deployments, not only in infrastructure, but also in the applications. So I want to turn it over to Nick now to introduce himself, his layer in the stack, who your customer is, and tell us about a success story.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. I just wanted to take a moment and thank the ElevateIT staff. That includes Casey and Robin and the rest of the staff for putting on such an amazing show. Thanks, Robin. I see you back there. I also want to thank the viewers who are joining us virtually. Thank you for joining us today, and all of our physical attendees. Thank you for coming today. As Jeff pointed out, my name is Nick James. I work for an undisclosed company. It's undisclosed for a reason that I won't disclose either. I run a team in third-party cyber risk, and my team is responsible for conducting anywhere between 5,000 to 7,000 cybersecurity assessments for the firm I work for. And our job during the assessment is to assess the cybersecurity risk that third party poses to my firm in doing business with them. So I think I'll pivot right off of a very salient point that Jeff made. As a part of the stack, and as we move closer to this concept, I'll call it a concept of DevSecOps, and bringing these 3 critical teams closer together, and as visualizing it as a stack that Jeff coined, I think it's absolutely critical that we are bringing security in as early as possible, right? I always like to say to my stakeholders and my business counterparts, I want to be there right, maybe even during or right after it's a drawing on the back of a napkin, okay? You're sitting at a diner, you're just ideating on the application that's going to solve a business problem. I want security to be sitting in that booth with you at the diner. That's critical, because we shouldn't be a bolt-on at the very end. It doesn't work that way, right? You can't put apples in an apple pie after the pie has been baked, right? So I mean, it's just a good analogy. So please make us a part of your core ingredient list when you're building your teams, and then keep us a part of the conversation, keep us engaged, and have a representative, at least for the very least, just have one person that's appointed by, let's say, your CISO within your organization, be a part of the standing working group or calls or project calls, whatever you want to call it, during the build and design phase of the application. Okay, and then as far as success stories, I do want to sort of stage the fact that I am here because of the importance of cybersecurity. I cannot speak as expertly as Jeff or Aaron or Chandra on hyperautomation, which is basically the amalgamation of RPA, AI, and ML. So I want you to understand that I'm here to help you help you sort of create a framework of thinking in the future for when these technologies do come to bear. How do you use current capabilities in your organization, as security capabilities in your organization, to secure such endeavors? But then also, how do you frame out strategic thinking and create strategic advances in order to continue to support this business? Because that's what the job of security is. It's to support and enable the business. So I'll stop there.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you,
Jeff.
Nick. Really appreciate that. So, I want to move into more of the current state questions now that the audience has had a chance to get to know you a little bit. And Aaron, I'd like to start with you. But before we dive into all the hyperautomation conversations, I want to take a step back and look at some of the top trends as a result of these digital transformations. What are some of those key enabling technologies that enterprises need to keep an eye on?
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, so as we all hear about it, we're actually facing a tidal wave of this digitization and digital transformation, and it's impacting every industry. So if I were to cite some reports that I have read from analysts, Omdia recently had a report about the top 5. They did a survey with many hundreds of enterprises and came up with the top 5 enabling technologies. So, and I'll just talk about these top 5 and touch on it so that you get a feel about what you need to keep an eye on and think about what is your strategy. So the top 5 digitization enabling technologies, number 1, and obviously that I'm very happy about, it says 5G. 5G and edge cloud is number 1. The second one is enterprise IoT. You must have heard about Internet of Things that basically allows you to have sensors and hundreds, thousands, millions of sensors to help you to collect data at the location that you need to get the data. So enterprise IoT is an important enabling technology. Once you collect the data, how do you deal with the data? So data lake, data strategy is also very important. Then you got to make use of the data. Otherwise, data is useless if you don't analyze it and use it to help you with improving business, bringing business value, or make some certain real-time decision, etc. So that goes to AI and machine learning. And then RPA, obviously, automation, robotic process automation. These make the top 5 enabling technology that enterprises are, to some extent, are keeping an eye on, trying to evaluate and trying to come up with a roadmap about what to do with those. And I wanted to also, emphasize the point about while we are talking about security and application where it happens at the higher layer of the stacks, it's also time to rethink about the foundation of your connectivity. There's another report from Gartner that talks about, again, top trends, 10 top trends, and I'm not going to talk about all 10 of them, but they're in 3 different categories. 1 is human-centric, so the user interface, GUI interface. Number 2 is location independent. And that is really something that really speaks a lot to what I do, location independent, mobile communication, edge cloud. So you bring the intelligence, the processing to the edge. So for security purpose, so for privacy, so if it's on-prem, then you also protect the privacy, the security, and you reduce the latency. So it doesn't have to go all the way half of the country to the data center and come back. That greatly improved the latency. So location independent is another big trend. And then the number 3 trend is about robustness and resiliency, and that speaks to security, cybersecurity, automation. So these are the top trends that we all should keep an eye on, think about for every enterprise, And then, from my perspective, from the foundation perspective, what's your connectivity? Nowadays, we're talking about hyper connectivity. So you want to be connected everywhere you go. You don't want to be on one type of network here in this convention center. As soon as you walk out, you have to drop your data session, drop your call, and then remake the connection, with a different network. That speaks to the location-independent aspect and the trend of it. What's the enabling technology? Obviously, that's 5G. That's definitely the wireless technology will enable that. The question is that how are you going to adopt that into your enterprise? That will help you to improve your efficiency and bring in the business value.
That's great. Thank you very much, Aaron. Really appreciate that. Is there any maybe color that the other panelists want to add on to that?
So I would like to actually add or share additional context. So a couple of months back, I was planning to write my next article on Forbes. I spent dedicated time on the weekends really thinking through where the industry is headed. I was not focusing on, hey, what are the top trends? Is it AI or is it Edge or is it 5G? Rather, hey, how can you increase speed to market? I was thinking about this North Star vision of how do you achieve a goal of increasing speed to market by 80%. I call that as enterprise as a service. What does that mean? This is based on my past experience at Fortune 270, that is a $12 billion company, and also Fortune 500 companies. The fundamental problem that was lagging is everybody talks about continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous operations. How many Fortune companies have got this figured it out? They get the continuous integration, but continuous deployment takes lots of investment. You need to have this. We don't need to dig deeper into the technology, but I'll just take an example so you can connect. How many of them have blue-green deployments going on other than Amazon or Facebook's or Google's of the world? What kind of investment that is needed? So you can just turn off some thousands of servers, turn on thousands of servers with scripting and automation. You don't see that happening in the actual lots and lots of companies other than the top 3 or top 4. When you boil that into what does enterprise as a service translate into? You need to have all the capabilities of automation as a service. I call that as intelligence automation. Somebody called that as hyperautomation. When you call that as an intelligent automation, it is very easy for us to go to Azure or AWS and do a quick POC and everybody claps and say, oh, we have done it, versus if you're supporting a 40-year-old legacy systems, there is a process built around it, there is a domain expertise that is built around it. How do you actually automate all the pieces and components? It is not easy to extract the domain knowledge that has been buried into people's brains, right? So you can't just deploy something. In my case, I'm translating that back to my actual real challenge on the ground. We have been helping all these, I just briefly mentioned, right? Top airlines of the world, top financial services of the world. They have the mainframe systems, best secured mainframe systems they have been running for the past 40 years. How do you actually automate the bits and pieces? Bringing in the automation, bringing in the DevSecOps, Jiras of the world, security scannings of the world, deployments of the world. So how do you actually implement infrastructure as a code into those legacy systems? That is the biggest challenge. I always challenge a vendor when they come and say, okay, we have got this piece figured out, versus did you figure out an actual migration of the legacy systems, operations, and also data? That's where, if a vendor is there in the audience, that's something that I would like to really learn more and how you have solved this problem. We have not scratched the surface of even that aspect. We need to really address that legacy modernization. Then we can talk about bringing AI as a service, ML as a service. To me, those are, if you go to Amazon or AWS, right? AWS has got this SageMaker AI as a service. You don't need rocket scientists, you just need integrators. Yeah. But let's figure out this 90% of the challenge on the ground, then we can accelerate with the new technology or trend. So that's my point of view.
And I really appreciate that, Chandra. Maybe you could touch on what your current automation strategy is for some of these, modernizing some of these legacy systems, where you're at.
Yep, absolutely. So when we talk about automation, I would like to go into a little bit of a technical depth here. There are three pieces: continuous integration, continuous deployment. Nobody talks about continuous operations. That is continuous security and compliance. When it comes to continuous integration, older applications, when somebody developed 40 years back, when they developed in COBOL or Fox or Fortran or whatever that language was, there was no repository. There was no code check-ins. There was no process established. On top of it, how did they actually do a security scanning, dynamic scanning, static scanning, before they deployed that code, right? On top of it, how did they generate these libraries to put into these? We did not have any container technology. We did not have any microservices technology. It is always like it takes 2 days to actually build a code, 3 days to deploy it. It takes 6 days to roll back. So all the other fun stuff, right? So what I'm trying to really challenge my team is, don't think about just going to the shiny object. We have solid investments on the ground. We are figuring out how to expose the existing investments as microservices patterns. How can we enable them into the containers? How can we integrate the security on the fly upfront, both static and dynamic? It takes 1 month to do the dynamic scanning on some of the code. That is not acceptable for a client. If a pandemic were to happen and if Delta were to come back and say, hey, we need this functionality, we should not ask, come back in 2 months. No. Those pieces, breaking those monolithic systems into those granular pieces is what I'm really trying to challenge vendors and also my team. We are working on enabling that as next generation services. That's how we accelerate delivery of the applications. I want to really address this full spectrum. Continuous integration, I want to repeat one more time. Continuous deployment, continuous operations. Continuous operations, it should not be a manual drill every time an auditor calls and Deloitte or PwC shows up. You spend 6 months gathering Excel files and doing all those things. So that all should be automated, and we are really working towards, we have assessed the current situation and we are working towards maturing it. Hopefully that makes sense with what is going on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're going to get that done this year. So my best to you. I want to switch it over to Nick, and from a cybersecurity lens, what are the top cybersecurity considerations like an organization should be considering, taking into account when discussing hyperautomation, AI, ML?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. Real quickly, I wanted to touch on Chandra and Aaron brought up some really great points, and I'm sure all of you saw me itching, and I'm like holding my mic. I'm like, when can I talk?
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. And Jeff's over like, Nick, just wait. Chandra, real quick. Chandra was talking about building blocks, okay? You can't fly a plane if you can't even get ground control working. You know what I'm saying? You need to work on your building blocks. I mean, the very simple blocking and tackling capabilities of a security team. So I know everybody wants to run. You want to make money for the business, and that's how, frankly, security gets paid, unless you're in the business of security, right? So when you hear of your technology teams going and doing amazing things and delivering such efficiency in your organization, like what Chandra was talking about, don't get the shiny object syndrome, okay? Focus on the building blocks: vulnerability scanning, patch management, identity and access management, logging and monitoring. These are all building blocks. It sets a great foundation for a good security program and for a good secure application that can be delivered on time if you bring us in as early as possible. I'm going to keep repeating this because I want to pound it into your head very kindly that please bring us in as early as possible. And then Erin talked about data. Like of the 5 trends she was talking about, she talked about data. What are you going to use that data for? You're going to use it to train your machine learning models. Would you like, I mean, there's this concept called garbage in, garbage out, right? If you put garbage in, all you're going to get is garbage on the other side. So you want to make sure when you're building data lakes that you're covering things off like data integrity, right? Encryption. Because if a threat actor comes in and poisons your data to influence different business outcomes that may give them a monetary incentive, then it's not really delivering to your customers, you're just delivering to the threat actor. So those are 2 of the fundamental points I really want to touch on. Now, I love going to these events and sitting where you're sitting right now, but a lot of the times I feel like I come in and all I take away is things that I can't do right now, and it leaves me disappointed. So what I want to share with you today are some quick wins with things you already have, like tools you already have at your house. I mean at your job, but at your house actually, because you're working from home mostly. So number 1, identity and access management. Account hygiene is critical, and just pull the cane if I talk too long, okay? All right. It's not sexy. Thank you, Robin. It's not sexy.
It's depending on what you name it.
So, account hygiene, it's simple. Like, inventory your accounts. You got bots out there doing RPA stuff and signing in, acting like humans. Inventory them, control them. They shouldn't be out there running rampant, right? Your organization wants to get automation anywhere or UiPath. Get on them. Be like, how are we going to control access? How are we going to control authorization? Number 2, use extraordinarily long passwords. Because guess what? Bots don't complain like humans do. And they don't forget, right, if you have the right technology. Number 3, segregation of duties is still a thing. Just because they're a robot doesn't mean that you don't control what they're allowed to do. And this feeds right into authorization. The bots are infinite. They're not finite. Human talent is finite. But bot talent, you can just spin up another bot. You know what I'm saying? There may be costs associated, but it's not as expensive as a human. So keep the scope of their work really narrow and only for what it is they're supposed to do, and have a population of bots assigned to each application. Don't allow one bot to do something for application B, which it also can do for application A, okay? And then number 4, least privilege. It feeds right back into segregation of duty. Make sure that the bots only have access to things that they need. Because guess what? If someone gets a hold of that bot, they can use it for nefarious purposes, and you just granted them the freedom to do whatever they, basically unfettered access. You gave them the janitor's keychain, right? So I'll stop at IAM. I have 2 more points I want to touch on, but I want to be sensitive of time. Back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I will appreciate that. Let's touch on those after we've gone through a couple more questions. I'd like to take it back to Erin, and let's take into focus the future, which can be scary because of the unknowns. It can be scary because there's a lot to do. So what's the role of AI, ML in technology infrastructure? Maybe you could provide some examples, and how do we adapt?
Of course. So when we talked about the digital transformation of every industry, including enterprise, AI and ML is automation. So it is a journey. So automation is at the early stage of the journey. As you get mature with automation, you gradually would want to adapt to artificial intelligence and machine learning to make you even more efficient and even more scalable. So I wanted to give an example of Ericsson, what we do here. So, for example, Ericsson is very much involved in building the infrastructure, the national infrastructure of the network, the communication network. But we ourselves, we are an enterprise as well. So I'll just give an example and introduce the concept of digital twin. So we as an enterprise, for example, we have a demonstration space. We call it Experience Center. So when we have customers come to our location, we can lead them into the Experience Center. They can touch and feel the equipment that we're selling to our customers. They can experience what that new technology looks like, feels like. So that's a physical experience center, and of course in there you can see a lot of 5G use cases comes to life. Then pandemic happens. Nobody comes to the facility, to the headquarters. Nobody goes to office, right? So then what? We digitize it. We create a digital twin. So the entire experience center is digitized, is up there on the web. We could have a virtual tour to our customers. We could do a virtual demonstration. I've been doing a lot of proof of concept and demonstration. Nowadays, all have to be on virtual. So that's an example of digitization. And how can you scale this? Then it takes automation. It takes artificial intelligence to really scale it. I'm just giving an example of a very small experience center. It's for demonstration purpose. But when you try to apply that to enterprise, and just think about it, during the pandemic time, I'm seeing that happening in a lot of different industry as well. Retail store, for example, you have a physical retail store. You could also order online. Warehouse, factory. So the concept of digital twin is really, reflecting the need to digitize your operation so that you're resilient to any kind of changes that brought in our way. So that's that really is a great example that speaks to how digitization can be facilitated and how that helped to continue the continuous operation. When a situation like pandemic happens, this makes you more resilient and makes you be able to continue to operate. So this is the concept of digital twin. Now I wanted to introduce another concept that's called network slicing, and I'm sure that if you start to look into connectivity, start to listen to 5G, you're going to hear a lot about network slicing. Is going to unlock the value for 5G, and I do strongly believe in that. And let me just touch at the very high level about it. So network slicing refers to the ability to slice and dice the network in a logical way so that you can get your guaranteed service level. And so imagine if we are a venue and we are going to host a Super Bowl, right? It is not, and nowadays, for a big event like that, we want AR, VR experience, we want 5G, but to establish a network from scratch for an event could be very inefficient. So what if you have a way to reserve a logical slice from a current big pipe of the network that serves the purpose for the week that Super Bowl is happening, guarantee your latency, your throughput just for that event, just for that week. After that week, I can just tear it down. How beautiful is that? So that's a concept of a logical network that you can reserve as a piece of the pie of the big pipe of the network that we have today. And the technology that enables that is called network slicing. So we slice the network and reserve it for the length of time it's needed, for the purpose it's needed to deliver that guaranteed service. So that's something that enterprises may want to consider as well for your enterprise. If you don't want to deal with the physical construction of the network, of the private network, a network slicing provided by the operators that you share in the big pipe. So basically there's a big highway, you have a lane that's reserved for you. How nice is that, right? So these are the big trends that I see from the connectivity, from the foundation perspective, and but believe me, it's not easy, right? If you want to facilitate this and be able to establish this just for the Super Bowl, tear it down, after the Super Bowl is done, it's complex. And that's why the automation is required, artificial intelligence is required every step of the way to construct that logical network and guarantee that level of service that you're going to receive.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's game-changing right there.
Very much so. Thank you.
Think I could get a reserved lane on I-35? That would be great, wouldn't it?
We can talk.
Yeah, great. So I got 3, almost 45 on my watch here. I was going to open it up to the panelists to maybe add some color to that, but maybe in the next question I'll turn it over to Chandra. If you want to speak to anything that maybe Aaron brought up, feel free to bring it up in there. But I guess what I'd like to know from you, when we look at things from a security lens, where do you see the industry headed with like secure app delivery? What's the big opportunity?
Yep, great question. So my goal and vision is to deliver applications faster. I always tell my team 80% speed to market. They ask me, how did I come up with 80%? I say, it's a North Star guidance. How do you do that? There are 3 things that we need to be doing, and we are actually doing on the ground. You need to assess legacy application code very quickly. I am partnering with a company called Cast Software. If you are interested, take a look. That gives us AI-based analytics on application, current architecture, and the code and all that quality and all that stuff. That accelerates speed to market. Once we are done with that, how do we take it to the next level for application modernization? I'm actually partnering with a company, a startup in Bay Area that has a lot of bots in terms of provisioning, in terms of migrating and all those things. So a lot of teams spend too much time creating all this in cloud, AWS or Azure or your private cloud, but they are automating the heck out of all that. So they're a startup, and they are also helping with speed to market acceleration. That is number 2. Number 3, we help with, my company helps with a lot of state and local companies. One of the state and local organization responsibility is child abuse and food stamps automation. So typically, if you look into state and local, a lot of manual paperwork that has to be processed, blah, blah, blah. I am partnering with a company based in Arizona. They are good at RPA, robotics process automation. They are automating the heck out of all the manual processes to process the food stamps processing and all those things. If you look into these 3 pillars, addressing the security with bots provisioning, migrating very quickly, doing robotics process automation for actual some of the requirements on the ground. It is not futuristic. It is actually happening right now. With all that, you will actually address the security loopholes or security vulnerability surface. And that's how I'm really pushing my team to deliver these applications quicker and faster. I am challenging, again, vendors to give me a pitch on how do you do dynamic security scanning for vulnerabilities so that we can accelerate speed to market. That is still an opportunity in the market. Okay?
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's interesting, Chandra, because you're pushing your team, right? Your team's got to grow and learn. The more we automate, the more systems that we have machine learning help us out. It's going to give opportunities for other people to move into new roles, right? It sounds to me like you're helping out with job strategy or job stratification, right? It's like satisfaction and strategy together. So that's fantastic, and that's a modernization approach, and I really, really appreciate that. But I want to kind of go back to Nick, because there was some more important points that I think that you wanted to touch on from a security perspective. And again, if you have any other additional maybe thoughts of what Aaron brought up with digital twin, some great examples of how they dealt with the pandemic, or some of the secure apps delivery concepts that Shonda brought up, feel free to touch on those as well.
I'll start with that. I mean, it's fresh in everybody's mind. So I think I'll go into network slicing. I think that's really great for security, actually, because we're logically separating, right? Right? We reduce the attacker's ability to pivot and just go like a pinball machine throughout your network by logical separation, right? There's Gartner cores out there, they're talking about a software-based segregation or separation. So I think that's definitely a technology capability that's also serving as a security capability, which is awesome. Two birds with one stone. And then what Chandra was touching on delivering applications securely, I'll just quickly, before I start on that, so I'm not going to have time to go through everything I had prepared for you, faux pas on my part. But if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I'll probably put it as an article, and you guys can just take a look at it. If you're interested, just come connect with me.
Maybe we'll invite you back next year as well.
I'll save this for next year when it's antiquated, right? So what he was touching on, we keep repeating this concept of DevSecOps. And Chandra is layer 7, Aaron's layer 1, but frankly, cybersecurity spans all 7 layers, right? We touch every single one. So bring us into the conversation. Once again, another plug. But I think what's most important, how you can extract the most value out of security in coming together as DevSec and Ops, is number 1 is threat modeling. Okay. I want to use a recent use case, SolarWinds, right? SolarWinds, I think it was just bad place, bad time. I could sit here and point fingers at them, but that's not fair, because I probably wouldn't have caught it either. I'm just being very real with you. If they had threat modeled, right, and really understood where their updates were being published, who was interacting with their updates, and how they were pushing it to their clients, maybe they would have caught it. Maybe is better than nothing, right? So that's number 1, threat modeling. Number 2, SAST, okay, static application scanning and testing. So I don't think that actually what that stands for, so maybe Chandra knows. I just call it SAST and DAST. But SAST is basically before the code is in runtime, we're able to actively tell you when you're writing code that may cause a security issue or is not in compliance with your organization's policy. And DAST is after its runtime, right? So those are really the 3 big components within the CI, CD, and CO. This is all Chandra, CO pipeline, where security can add value. And before I get pulled off the stage, I want to tell you, please keep your bots as far away from the internet, what otherwise known as DMZ. Keep them as far away as possible. Okay? They don't need to be touching the DMZ or the internet. Don't let them touch. I mean, I guess chatbots is an exception, but keep them heavily guarded, because last thing you need is giving the capability of central command through a threat actor to control an army of bots. That's the last thing you want. Okay, so I'll stop there. Like I said, if you want to learn more about the notes I've jotted down, I'll probably put it on LinkedIn, or you can just come talk to me about it. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nick. That's a good point. One of the things that we need to be thinking about with things like chatbots that are exposed to the general public is, those systems that we need to have in place, maybe fronting the bots, right? Like, think of OWASP, right? And an implementation of that in like a web application firewall, because all this traffic is going over HTTP, HTTPS from our customers. And so, like, having those systems in place, I think, would be very important for any bot that is exposed to the general internet. So we have, about 9 minutes left. I wanted to give the audience an opportunity to maybe ask any questions that you have of the panel, whether it's infrastructure, security, applications, or data of myself. And so just wanted to throw out there from a hyperautomation perspective, has anybody got anything that they would like to maybe ask the panel? If you do, please raise your hand.
I don't think we have a mic runner.
Oh, we don't have a mic runner. That's terrible news.
Tom, do we have a mic? No, I think you have all of them. Oh, great.
That's okay, I can do that role.
All right,
Oh, okay.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, is there, oh, here we go.
Simon Chang, APT Software. I heard from Nick's really focus on security and focus on Aaron and Chandra's about moving automation to support business. What is the balance? Because there's always a balance of security or acceleration and get the business result and time to market. So can you share some insight, the panel?
Nick will be a correct person.
No, I love that. You know, I'm a big believer of the yin and the yang. Balance is key, not just in the workplace, but just throughout life, right? Balance is key. So I think that in developing, let's call it a center of excellence, right? Of those three cohorts, the dev, the sec, and the ops, you need to balance the priorities. If the business wants to deliver in, let's say, 2 weeks, we need to be realistic and do the analysis ahead of time and make sure we're delivering to the business realistic expectations. And therein striking a balance between expectations and properly securing the app before it ships. So I think that's about all I have to say to that. Chandra or Aaron or Jeff?
Yeah, very quickly. Actual example, last week I was in a client call. We did a final scanning and vulnerability. There were 50 outstanding items that came up, but not all of them are major risks. The challenge is really going back and validating what are the calculated risks we are going to take and how we can put them into the backlog. I don't think there is a real formula of balancing versus taking a calculated risk and minimizing the risk is what I would say the good approach to follow. Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about the risk across the entire spectrum. There's business risk, right? There's cybersecurity risk. There is employee risk. There's reputational risk. There's so many risks to look at, and I think a lot of times, you know, maybe we're looking at things a little bit maybe through a different lens, and sometimes, you know, we're trying to deliver something that has very little business value in 2 weeks. I mean, that's a risk. We're working on the wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
So I totally appreciate and agree with that. There's a balance and there's a perspective of lenses, and I think it speaks to some about threat modeling, right? When you're looking, how do you understand what your risk is? Threat modeling is, I think, an important piece of that. It's a great question. Really appreciate that.
Hello. You mentioned threat modeling. Do you have any good frameworks or any tips for organizations to start their threat modeling journey?
You want to take that?
I'm happy to take it. So Microsoft was known for publishing Stride. So Stride, once again, I'm really bad with acronyms if everybody can't tell. Stride is an acronym that stands for 5 distinct things. That is encompassed within that framework. And also Microsoft does, I believe it's free, a free threat modeling tool. So you can just download it, put it on your desktop, jump on a litany of maybe even YouTube to start for free and just start plugging away. Back when I was in the military and I was doing networking, right? My focus was more on networks and building networks. I forget the name of the software, but basically you were dragging icons and dropping them, and one would represent a switch, the other one would represent a router, and the other one a computer. What's that? Visio? Well, it's like Visio, but it actually routes the traffic after you connect everything to make sure you did it the right way.
Oh, was that a Cisco tool?
Yeah, it's a Cisco tool.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Forgot the name of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's very much like that, the threat modeling tool, and each component or object has its own set of properties. If it's a web server, you can select the OS and things like that. You can open and close ports, and then once you have everything set up, it's almost like a sandbox, artificial environment of your infrastructure and the network and the OS layer. Then it will tell you exactly where you may fall short or there may be a security risk. And this way, you're still in the point of where you haven't invested the time, money, or resources to actually build the stuff. It's just a concept, and you've already thought through the risks, and that's key.
Yep. Neer, have you had an opportunity? Thank you, Nick. Have you had an opportunity to look into Cloud Security Alliance working groups and their investment and giving back to the communities? If not, I strongly encourage you. Yeah. There's a lot of cloud security modeling, and it just gives you a jump start. So strongly encourage you to look into. Yeah. Sure.
That was great feedback. Really appreciate that. You know, we're about ready to wrap up here, so I just want to thank the panel, Nick, Chandra, Aaron. You guys have done great. Really appreciate that. Obviously, our event hosts. And, you know, if you guys haven't visited some of the vendors, I've had some just great conversations out there. There's some good products. You know, we have to give it up to our vendors and sponsors, because that and our event hosts is why we're all here, right? So go out there and visit them, see what they got, grab a beer, and then make it a great rest of your day. Aaron, or sorry, Robin.